Okay, I think we should get going. Okay, it's at 7:36. This is the January 16th meeting of the Concord Middle School Building Committee. I call it to order. We have a number of things on the agenda today, and some of it, we're at an interesting point. We have a lot going on, okay, in terms of the visioning and the beginnings of design. We're going to hear about that in terms of what's happening, okay. But we'll also be integrating that with some things for the future. We're going to look at the schedule. We're going to look at the schedule for the future, and there are some inherent things embedded in that we need action on, which we'll talk through as we talk through the schedule. So it's sort of a combination of a review of what's going on right now and looking a little bit further out and seeing what's next and how we prepare for that. Okay, so that'll be going on. So we got to stay focused and hopefully get through this by our time, 9 o'clock. We have a number of meeting minutes that we need to approve. There's a sustainability subcommittee on 10/9, a finance subcommittee on 10/24, a design subcommittee on 10/25, finance subcommittee on 12/5, and 12/19 full building committee. And these were all distributed. And I would ask if there are any changes to additions, any observations on any of those? Yes.
I'm not sure if it was, because I can't seem to pull them up on my phone, if it was the finance subcommittee on 12/5 or the building committee on 12/19, but at the end, it says Mrs. Mates, or Ms. Mates moved to adjourn, and I think it should be Ms. Bates.
Okay. So noted. Okay. Any other changes?
Very minor, October 25 design subcommittee, paragraph 5, last sentence, change recommendation to recommend. Just a typo.
Okay.
Could you email that to Erin so in case I don't get it right? Thanks.
Okay. With that, would I hear a motion to accept all of these minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We actually, believe it or not, there are people following our actions so closely that they're asking us when specific meeting minutes are going to be posted. So that's a good thing, okay? The other side of it, though, is we got to be diligent in getting the committee minutes posted. So I know our process involves some complicated logistical things, but as soon as we can get the minutes done, the better, okay, whenever we have a meeting. So make sure that if you're running a subcommittee, make sure that somebody is indeed taking the minutes, and we know that, and then that person who is taking them, get them transmitted as the tape or the information transmitted as quickly as possible to Julie and Erin, right?
So to explain, in your subcommittees, you will have your meeting, someone will create the minutes and pass it out to your committee. That subcommittee then has to approve the minutes before they come before this board to be approved. So it is sort of a longer process so that the people also know that. So your sustainability subcommittee met on recently. So they need to publish send over their minutes to the committee, and then the next subcommittee meeting, which is on the 30th, they will need to be approved by the sustainability subcommittee to then be brought before the building committee in February. So just so you understand the process.
That isn't exactly how we've been doing it, so maybe you and I can talk offline, because we do need to streamline. We've been using this, maybe we can talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get something clear
clarify.
out to all the subcommittee chairs.
Okay. The first item on the agenda today is another quick look at the project charter, right? We have that in a way we can look at it. Yeah. What has transpired here is I and we have some others have taken a look at it. took a look at the objectives as they were done so well by Julie last time, and tried to look at them for consistency and whatever, and came up with a number of small changes, okay, to them. The changes are sort of two. Almost all of the items, the changes are small and relate to clarification and being more specific. Sometimes we separated where there were two concepts embedded in one objective. I tried to separate those so each one has a specific idea. That's the majority of them. The second is a little bit different. There are two areas that I was sort of wrestling with and wanted to talk a moment about, and that is the area of things that are in potential community use of the facility, okay? And the second area is in the sustainability area. And in both of those, I want to be careful with our objectives, that they're accurate, okay, and that we have been intentional in making decisions about those. So, for example, on the what is number 7, instead of saying specifically an auditorium for town meeting right now, the objective at this moment that I've written says the design a facility that's not only for the students but also facilitates community use. This will include, and then left a blank, as we talk about in a little more depth, the auditorium, the potential expanded gym, and a potential, as we heard the other night, the potential of field use, okay, or field, more fields or improved fields, that the thing. Those are the ones I've heard about, and there can be others to that list. But what I want to do is be clear about what those are and have discussed them with the town, the finance committee, so we are collectively understanding that we may cost the school with a smaller, but we'll cost them also with these. And if we put them when we put them in the objective, we want to be sure that those are the ones we want to do. Okay, so that's that one. The second area was the sustainability thing, the sustainability objectives, which there were 2. And I know the sustainability committee is working on those, okay? It's a similar kind of thing. I am wrestling in that area with the detail, because I think there's a quite understandably so, a desire by the sustainability group to have a significant level of detail so we're clear of what we're doing, which is really positive. But in some ways that's sort of not in concert with the way we've stated the other objectives, okay? And I want to try to be consistent there, and I also want to try to be clear as to what we are talking about in terms of the sustainability. In the end, having looked at this and looked at some of the work you did, I would like to have, I think there should be 2, and one talks a little bit about process, i.e. the potential of a passive house, or, if that's what we're going to say, that's a process that we're going to use. And the second is a little more detailed in terms of a description at a high level of the specifics, if you follow me. Okay. So in this draft, I've sort of done a couple of the lines there also, okay, taken that out. And I want to be very clear right now, this does not indicate at all that I am moving away or want to move away from the strong commitment that we've made to sustainability and the most sustainable that we can do, right? And that I understand that we're far along the way of exploring passive house, and we're far along the way of adopting a specific energy usage thing. I want us to have collectively, as a group, had a strong review of a more detailed sustainability plan, and then put the objectives in a summarized form into this, if that makes sense, okay? and we'll get to this in the future, but I think in order to get there, okay, I sat in the sustainability subcommittee meeting, which I thought was a very good start, okay? And I understand we're gonna have two more of those over a period of time, is that right?
There's one planned,
When?
and then the second we might meld with the design.
But my notion here, and my thought is, and this overlaps on planning a little bit, is that whether it be one or two, to give the charge to that committee to bring back to the large committee description of what we would want to do with regard to sustainability, okay? And that should have a reasonable level, a level of detail that is a pretty good description of what our intent is, okay? And then to have a fairly robust discussion right here about that with you know, where everybody has a chance to ask questions and test it, okay? Because this is a big issue. And then, once we've agreed on this is the direction we're gonna go, then to have this, then to do the two objectives in the charter objectives. Does that make sense, first off? Okay. So that's a time frame. We had talked a little bit about this yesterday. What is a reasonable time frame to have that occur? My guess is you're going to need one or two meetings in order to do that.
It sounds like it, yeah.
And I can elaborate when we get to the designer update, if that would be
Yeah,
helpful.
but that would occur. We talked yesterday, sort of the end of the month, but it could be a little bit longer than that. But
Yeah, I think our January 30th meeting is going to give us a really big step forward, because we will be comparing and contrasting all of the sustainable approaches for the project. And so I think through that meeting, the subcommittee and our team will develop a common understanding of what is achievable. And so I think we'll make a big step in that meeting.
so it sounds like that it would be possible to bring back to our next committee meeting, okay, a suggestion from the Sustainability Committee. This is the direction that we see going with regard to sustainability issues.
Yeah, when that meeting is in mid to late February?
It's in February.
13th.
February.
I'm just wondering, Kristen, excuse me, I agree that I think your team is going to present a lot of information to the sustainability subcommittee meeting at that 30th meeting. Excuse me, I don't know that we'd be able to finalize the kind of 2 bullet points in that meeting. That just feels like a lot for that meeting, is my initial reaction. And so maybe we need one more before the 13th to kind of finalize. Does that?
Yes, and I think that finalizing the bullet points again might just come even farther toward the end of the project. I think if this, at the 30th, what we'll be looking for is that narrowing of the goals. And that may not translate itself into exactly what EUI, because we're going to have to be exploring the concepts and alternatives, and how the EUI is affected by the different footprints and site locations. So I think even though we'll have narrowed our objectives on passive house, lead, and net zero, those then need to be applied to the preliminary concepts. So finalizing these will likely follow that.
I'm very interested in completing the objectives. I'm more interested in us having a collective vision of where we're headed with sustainability. Okay, and I just top of mind, and others can chime in here. Number one, what does it mean net zero ready? Okay, and what would then mean to go to net zero? Okay, what the delivery method that you're suggesting is it passive house, is it some combination, etc. What is an implied energy target? Are we a full electric facility? And I'm sure there are 10 others that I haven't mentioned, but be able to bring those back. So we air it here, and everybody has a chance to chime in, and whether we make a decision in that meeting or a subsequent meeting based on that dialogue, it moves us toward, this is our position on sustainability. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Okay, so we would most probably, I would say we would have a good discussion in that meeting on the 13th, and it would be probably another meeting before we completely finish it.
Yep.
But, and as Andy, is that consistent with what what we need in terms of when we need to have that direction?
So, if we can get like, after the next meeting, if we can get some sort of the goal that we're looking for, and also if we can try to
Yeah.
put a draft on this.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about this. We'll be, once we have that, we'll be able to do this, I think, fairly easily. What I'm worried about is and I'll come back to this on other topics a couple of different times. I'm trying to take away whatever roadblocks that we have for the designer in terms of moving forward with the next phases of the process. And it seems, from what I saw on the risk assessment and the discussions we had the other day, that relatively soon, and when we're ready, but as soon as possible, that we have a direction that we can say this is where we're headed. Okay. Everybody understand that? Any questions or observations? Because it's fairly big. That's a fairly important discussion. Yeah. Okay, great. So you guys are charged with doing that. Okay. And we'll come back to the objectives for sustainability when that occurs, because then I think we'll be pretty able to craft a process objective and an overall statement of where we're headed. Okay.
Now, the architects are going to help with the sort of the decision points in that sustainability
Correct, in all aspects. I
discussion
think
and
of,
process.
The feasibility study as we come on board and we have very little to start, and we accumulate and feed more and more information to the subcommittees and the building committee. And at the same time, that increase of information gathered over the period of time helps you narrow your vision and goals concurrently. So it's very much kind of a cone that we're moving toward, but every step of the way we'll be providing our experience from other projects, and then also just site-specific, community-specific responses.
So we'll get has everybody seen these yet? The last one I did?
No.
Okay, so we'll get a copy of this to everyone. Okay, these small changes that. Oh, there is
It
one?
was handed out to us.
Okay, so you have it, so you can all take a look at that. Again, those two that we talked about, the issues related to what we want to do in terms of town issues support, and the sustainability are the ones where there was any significant change. The rest of it is just sort of rearranging to make it clear. Okay.
Tim, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So there's a lot of interest in this from the community, obviously. And are these drafts, will we be posting them? And do we post these as we're going through the process, or do we post them when they're I'm thinking about how we communicate this really robust process that's going on. I mean, this is really being done very well, and I'd like to be able to communicate that.
I don't mind posting it all. What I don't want is where we're working to make their implied judgment of you're pulling back or you move. We're still working on it, right? We haven't made a decision. So I worry about that, but I have no trouble with people seeing the documents, right? And I want to take a look at this a little bit, but I don't have any trouble posting this as a working draft.
So I think we might want to think what context we put that in and how we frame it when we post it, that this is a drafting process, this is under consideration, what's the language we use that can most communicate that we're really trying to get there.
Because both issues are very sensitive. The town, the support is sensitive, and again, I don't at all want to say I'm moving away from any of the support of those things, but I want to make intentional decisions about them and make sure that we've talked with the right town people to say that this indeed is what we want, and the acknowledgement that it's going to probably cost a little bit more, right? So.
And in that process, where do we feed in community input? Because clearly, as we're working on the draft, we can't be juggling external input also, but at some point, we do need to hear that community input on
Right.
what our goals are and what our priorities are. So where does
I
that?
think in this, you mean the sessions we have, right, are the primary vehicle for that? I mean,
Okay.
there's other community.
In the
input.
forums, okay,
Yeah, I believe so.
okay.
Yeah, I think between the forums, these public meetings, we're getting some regular email traffic right
Right,
now. I
right.
think just continuing to publicize the different options. I think that's a pretty good range of options at this point, so making sure people are aware.
Okay.
If we get to the, sort of the March meeting, and we have this pretty well completed, I think that would be good. Okay, that we would have, these are the two things we're certainly going to cost and hopefully be able to do the set of things related to the supported town requests. Okay, oh, the other in there is shelter in place and the generator and all that. We have to talk about that. Okay. And on the other side, these are the sustainability things. Those are the two, really.
Okay.
So that's sort of the objectives process. So again, take a look at what was passed out, okay? And we're very open to any other manipulation of the others. I tried to make them clear, okay, in terms of, for example, the last two, I sort of separated transparency and the cost thing. They were sort of together, okay? The last one basically is we want to make good trade-offs and judgment about the balance of the costs, and then one before that, 14, deals more specifically with transparency. So there's not two thoughts embedded in one objective. Okay.
Tim, could I speak to those last two, just very briefly? Some of our items are very declarative. The project will do this, will do that. I worry that people might think we're equivocating on 14 and 15, that it should be transparent. I would hope that one is
Yeah,
really
that's a good
bold,
point.
declarative. It's gonna be transparent. It is now, it will continue to be. And I think that 15 is the fail-safe, if you will, that people understand that some of what we do at this stage is aspirational and it's gonna meet fiscal realities, and we're gonna have tough choices to make, not all of which we can foresee right now. Nonetheless, we will balance.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's a good
So it's a very good point. It's in keeping with what I had said before, right? That we have it here. We're committed to trying to make this happen. We're going to make this happen, right?
I mean, I'm not concerned, I just worry about interpretation from somebody who
Yeah, that's
hasn't heard what we're doing around the table.
okay. Great. I think we're making progress on these, and we'll need to talk about a similar process to what we just spoke about with sustainability with regard to these the town commitments. Okay. All right. The next item is the project schedule. So Andy.
So right now, we don't have a full project schedule. That's because we're still waiting for the town meeting date and the town meeting vote date. So until I get those two dates, then I can develop a full project schedule. Because as of right now, we're targeting for this phase feasibility study. We're going to target to get like the cost estimate the end of February, the beginning of March. So the end of feasibility study will be the end of March. That's the end of feasibility study. And we're targeting to get the schematic design done early July. Cost estimate will be for schematic design will be starting in June. So that's where we are right now. But beyond that, I need the town meeting and town vote date to develop a full project schedule as identified in my last risk register.
If we keep with that and concentrate on the next month or two, when you say at the end of feasibility, what are the few specific things that will be completed by the end of this feasibility?
Well,
By the end of feasibility, you will have all of the information you need to fill out your project charter. You will have selected a preferred schematic design. So at the end of feasibility, and that's that end of March date, not the July date, we will have presented several concept alternatives, and we will have narrowed it down to a location on the site and a direction for the building concept. That is then refined in schematic design, but at the end of feasibility, we'll have the project cost, scope, and budget all laid out, along with any of the goals that you've stated in your project chart.
So, and kind of stepping back to what occurred or occurring now, you're doing an educational visioning, right? That it'll be completed
At the end of January,
at the end of January, and then you use that,
as a transition to the concept alternative phase,
right?
and that really takes you up to the estimating. And in parallel to that process, you have sustainability informing throughout.
So in February, and am I jumping the gun here? Is this part of your?
We do have a handout on it.
Okay, so, but what I want people to go away with here is an understanding of the next 2 months. What is the process that we will be going through at a reasonably high level? And I think I saw that in here, so we can wait on that. Okay.
Can we also say there's no schedule associated? This is very good, this list here, but it doesn't really say what our interactions are with this and with you.
That's part of it.
And I think this has been an issue for me, not that anybody's doing anything wrong, but it's been an issue for me since the beginning. It's hard to see where we actually make a decision or need to have studied something in depth, need to come prepared to say yes or no and so forth. So I think we need to know kind of what the impacts are of this on us and what our specific role is. Maybe that's
part of today's meeting.
Okay.
So, good segue. One other comment before we leave the schedule totally. There is a presidential primary vote September 15th, correct? Is that the right date, Stephen? No. Carlin, no?
September 1.
Okay, so thank you. We need to factor that into our timeline. So we're gonna, a new variable we didn't have until this past week, September 1, okay.
My apologies, that's the state election.
Primary.
Presidential primary is March 3rd, yeah.
Okay, we need to do our homework on these dates, obviously,
If we can just focus on this
Yeah.
for a minute, because this is another key area where we need to provide information to these people, okay? And it's basically what Andy just said. What is our target for the election, and what is our target for the town meeting?
Right,
Okay,
so-
and I'm not suggesting, it seems as though we spoke briefly about this yesterday, that there is a primary in early September, and then there's the large election. And those are two candidates for that in terms of the election date, okay? And then, once that is set, then you can talk about the meeting time. What I think is useful today is and I need Stephen and Susan and someone, Heather, I think, who should be involved in that discussion and because we're going to start that. And my first cut on it should be some representation from the selectmen. Yourself, Stephen, chairman of the school committee, Lori, and probably our chairs. And I'm open to further.
Yeah, so I think the select board, either the liaison or whoever the chair is, who's going to be the chair for the upcoming year, should be a part of this. The town clerk should be a part of this. And then again, I mentioned this early on, the only variable that really can have an impact on the schedule is if the state primary is the first, the the presidential election is the 3rd of November. 1st of September, 3rd of November. We did find out early on that if we were going to be on the presidential ballot, you have to have that submitted to the Secretary of State by the first Wednesday in August.
Mhm.
I don't know if that applies to the primary, but that's why I have Kari. The town clerk is involved. She can tell you stuff off the top of her head. But and I don't know, what I further don't know is, does town meeting have to have approved the article before it goes to the Secretary of State? Because I think you can submit things to the Secretary of State in for approval on the ballot, if it's going to be the exact same language that town meeting will consider perhaps later in August. I don't, that those are the variables that we really need to nail down.
Well, if relatively soon,
Yeah.
we try to get a group of people together that I just talked about, okay, and discuss. I don't think this takes a lot. I think it's sitting down and talking about what the alternatives are and making a decision, okay? Is it possible to have you understanding of all of those issues that you just raised, okay? If we were to do it this time, what is the notice, what is the equipment for the meeting, all of that. So when we go into that meeting and talk about the election, we'll be able to fairly quickly set the time for the meeting.
Sure.
Okay. So I will take the responsibility to try to get that together. And I wasn't clear as to your answer related to the selectmen, who it should be.
Because I think there'll be a new chair over the summer. And so it'll either be liaison or the chair or both to work on this.
Okay.
To make the
For
decision.
now,
maybe
if we're
it's-
having a discussion soon though,
I would like to have a discussion in the next week or 2 weeks.
It'll be, yeah, I mean, it's-
Susan and the
And
chair.
and Susan,
edits it.
okay.
yeah,
Are there any other people? Do we need finance or?
no, just like I said, I think
Town clerk.
Yeah.
John can be
If-
part of it, but the clerk really.
if Kari can be there, the
Yeah.
clerk, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, it's really, it's really Kari is really who knows all the stuff. And the good news, it's not like trying to schedule a meeting where the dates are all, and times are all variable. It's all pretty much set.
Yeah.
And so the deadlines and thresholds that you need to achieve, Kari will know.
Yeah, I have a number of small concerns. I want to make sure that the process is inclusive, so that this doesn't look like just we set a date because we like that date, but it involves town, it involves the selectmen, it involves the town clerk. So we get the right time frame. Okay, so I want that to be, I want that to happen. And most of what I'm concerned with, and I'm sorry about the process today, but what I'm trying to do is take away obstacles to getting the schedule, the full schedule in place and getting a little more ability to look at a schedule that everybody can understand, okay? And so I'm going to make sure this committee does everything we need to do in order to get that schedule. So I want to get this meeting done and I want to get that date set.
Can I get those dates, if possible, by the end of this month?
Right.
So that way I can, at the next meeting, I can present a full schedule.
Okay.
We'll talk
so-
after the meeting and figure
Yeah,
out.
I'll take the lead and try to get that scheduled, and if we can, do what's necessary in terms of getting the details such that we don't have sort of town clerk details that would slow us down.
I think what we'll probably do, or what I would recommend, is what you did, is what Hill did for the project schedule, where there was like option A, B, and C. You could probably do that for the town meeting and election schedules. And I guess under the heading of transparency, I think one of the things I heard, early on from this committee as the new guy is that midsummer town meetings are frowned upon because people are on the road. I think the timeline may yield a special town meeting in the summer, depending on, the variables that, like I said, are beyond our control.
Yeah.
And I think the community, it's a good thing we're nailing this down now, because we're gonna have to spend a few months telling the community why we're having this
Yeah.
Well,
special town
I
meeting.
don't think
People
that's
need to
the
go do
case
that.
now. I think we're pretty focused on the fall, and we can explore this in our discussion, but I don't
It's a
think.
very unusual fall with so many
Yeah.
limiting choices here that are already predetermined.
I mean, the biggest thing is the August deadline for the Secretary of State for the November ballot. That's the thing that really kind of throws everything off, and whether or not the town meeting has had to have voted on it before that.
So we'll get together in the
Yeah,
next week.
we'll talk about
confirm all
that.
this.
My main point was getting something going that's going to get this decision made. Okay, so that's good. Okay. Any other questions about the schedule and the kind of issues that Charlie raised? I think Kristen is going to go over the schedule, the design schedule in a little more detail, right? So we'll
Yeah, we had sustainability subcommittee update. I don't know if Matt
Yeah.
wants to do a few
Yeah,
words.
John, and so we had a sustainability subcommittee meeting last, Wednesday. It was more of just kind of an introduction between SMMA and the subcommittee. This was the first time we've met since SMMA was brought on board. and it was an opportunity for subcommittee members and those in attendance to just kind of talk about the history and the thinking to date and start the discussion with SMMA. And now the next steps are Kristen and her team are kind of working on generating feedback in response to the discussion that we had last week. And so if last week was kind of more the thoughts coming from the subcommittee that's been involved to date, I think that 30th meeting will be more of a reaction from SMMA. So I'm hoping anyone who's interested in sharing SMMA thoughts to certainly attend.
Okay. The design, yeah.
Great. So in other recent meetings, we wanted to give a quick update on the community meeting, and anybody who was there is welcome to chime in after I go over some of my takeaways from that meeting. We had, I think, a very good turnout, and I think we had a very positive and engaged group with lots of great questions. And so we started out with just kind of a high-level overview of where we're at in the process, and inform them that we would be coming back and provide many other engagement opportunities for the community in smaller group meetings, having some SBC members at other meetings, and then our own community forums as well. So some of the highlights from the community, some of the concerns and asks were that we do consider traffic both during construction and in the end result, because this is going to be a larger school at one site as opposed to a dispersed. So we recognize that that will be a concern by the community. And for that, we are doing a traffic study. And so that will give us all of the information that we need to make recommendations that will help the design in all of those phases and construction address any traffic concerns. We had a lot of asks for visuals. We went to the meeting without visuals because it was intended to be a listening and feedback session. And so we didn't let everyone know that this was so early in the process. We really need to hear from them. And we are in the process of gathering information. So really it's too soon to put pen to paper for any building footprints or anything like that. We did hear a lot of questions regarding inclusion and just general interest from the CPAC about making sure that everyone is equitably addressed in the final building.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. We have already spoken on following up, and I've reached out to CPAC, and we're working to have a CPAC meeting where I attend. Ruth Gruby, our special social, can't even talk this morning, sorry. Student service director, and the design team have offered to participate in that, probably remotely, but to at least hone in on the concerns and have the design team hear them directly and then decide what to do next from there. So we are actively addressing what we heard the other night, and we'll be working on a date shortly.
Yeah. So
can I just chime in? I was going to leave this for communication, but received an email from a community member related to this topic, so I figure I'll bring it up. But I was asked yesterday to then share it with everyone, so I will do that. It's got links and information that is perhaps valuable to what we're talking about. So look for a distribution of that email.
Great.
Okay.
In any of that, and you can talk to this, my feeling of whenever I was involved with the school committee, anything from a specific parent in a special education thing, we were very careful of in terms of distribution. And if they asked, I just think I would check again to make sure that.
That's my letter, and
Yeah,
it's addressed to the building committee and to the school committee.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure Dawn had me.
Yeah, I just.
Right, so you followed up yesterday asking to then distribute, so long as that's okay. It's got, it's links and information, it's nothing personal
I just always
or private.
want to go overboard on that.
Yeah, okay.
There was, needless to say, a request for continued and more engagement, and so we will again be doing that as mentioned at the beginning. There were some concerns expressed over athletic fields and making sure that the end result does consider the athletic fields. And it seemed that there was, related to that, kind of request that we really get a lot of feedback and help from you all on how the high school project went, to make sure that we have lessons learned from the high school project, to make sure that the middle school doesn't have any of that, any of those concerns riding with it. And then also professional development for the teachers was discussed. And I think Lori responded great. It's definitely something that's being looked at and will be worked on so that when the building comes online in its new state, the teachers are ready to really actively and use it to its best function. So that is what I have for major highlights. I don't know if I missed anything for those who were there.
I think there were a couple of lessons learned at a very good meeting. What were there, maybe 50 or 60 people? Was that a reasonable estimate? I heard from individuals who said, I'm here because I got individual emails, personal emails from other people, which suggests to me we can't do enough in the way of teasing out this information, getting it out to the community. Apropos of the visuals, it would have been very harmful to the process to have visuals. People would have debated the visuals. I think in our next session we can front load. Here is how this session works. Here's what we're going to do. Because it took a few minutes for people to figure out what our exact process was, because they came with these expectations. Had to resort them, and then they settled down, and it was very productive.
I have a suggestion related to visuals at the next community, is it February 27th? I thought it might be helpful to do case studies of the buildings that we as a group have toured and talk through what we liked about them, what was powerful about them, what is different than what's being done now. I think if that's a presentation, there was a lot of curiosity about which projects and why did you guys like them? Lots of questions about it. So if we can collectively do some sort of case study with some photos or, I don't know. I think
I
that
totally
would be
agree. As I
helpful.
stood there trying to describe what
Yeah.
we saw, I agree with a picture or two being worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
I think that some of the questions, and we heard it from the League of Women Voters too, what does learning look like in these new buildings?
Yeah.
And one of my thoughts was to try to get someone who's actually living in one of these new buildings and teaching in one of these buildings to come and talk a little bit.
And I know we're going to talk on this when we probably do our updates on community activities. We're at the first Friday with the league in just a couple of weeks. That's exactly what they've asked me to package. So I've got a 20-minute window to put together a really robust presentation with examples and all that we will then be able to use in multiple forums. I actually was thinking of you when I talked with them yesterday, that's exactly what they're hoping for, and make it a little more concrete.
Because the experience is that whenever you start talking about this, it lifts the discussion up.
Yeah.
It starts people's minds working, which is exactly what you want in terms of this kind of session, right? And I think once you describe that, they'll be able to ask better questions. And there was some of the there were a couple classic comments about, well, remember all the open space in the 60s and that didn't work and all that, and you're going to get that, okay? But when particularly Laura starts talking about it, and others chime in, talking about when we've seen the schools and how they work, I think it starts to really come alive.
I think what the visuals will do is showcase how the architecture supports that, right? Like that, the goal is to have everyone understand education's different, right? We all know that, but why is it important to have a building that, we want to show how the architecture can support this and be flexible for the future, because education will continue to change. So I think the visuals will help.
I would also
Go ahead.
just say there, excuse me, there was another suggestion from one of the attendees that our next forum be in a different forum, but in a cafeteria or more conversational style area, which I thought was a great idea, especially if we really want to discuss, because several of us ended up sitting towards the front and twisting the whole time, but an auditorium isn't a great place for a discussion And if we hold it in a cafeteria or somewhere, we can, I think, enable that feedback and discussion.
Along those lines, you know, I mentioned the comment about microphones.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was, I sat in several different areas of the room, and it was nearly impossible to hear a lot of the comments coming from the front.
Yeah.
That would be point number one. Point number two is you stood off to one side, and when you responded or picked people, you know, to ask a question, you went to one side and not to the other. So there was a very uneven distribution of asking for input. So I think stand in the middle and fan it out, make sure you get everybody. And then the last comment is that some people made 4 comments, some made 5 comments. And I just tried to track with these points. So it almost became, in some cases, boom, 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 one after the other, and some people kept raising their hand and kept getting ignored. And I would say last, I'm not sure you need 2 whole hours, just a comment. I think if you want to really get a lot of these sessions going, an hour, 2 hours is a lot. Start them on time, let people ask one question, and you know, and make sure that everybody gets their shot. Those are just kind of my high-level comments, but I felt, you know, by 8:30, people were running a little bit out of steam. So some wanted to stay all night.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Charlie, I had a different experience. I thought that it really went quickly, and I was really encouraged by the number of questions and the participation from the audience. And I would just also add, and you may have said this, Kristen, in the very beginning of what you heard, lots of comments about energy efficiency and health and wellness of the building.
All
Lots of
positive, by the way, and
Yes.
uniformly positive
Yeah.
about
There was
sustainability.
specific comments about air quality.
Yeah.
There were specific comments about net zero.
Natural light.
The word sustainability was used a lot, but it wasn't necessarily all that focused. But I think if you counted the number of times sustainability was said, it was a lot.
Yeah.
Especially with the connection to the outdoors.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a very, very, very encouraging meeting.
I can say, as someone who presents at a lot of these community meetings, that was well attended. I get some community meetings, there's like 5 or 10 people, and you know, they're there for a specific reason, a gripe or they're in a butter, whatever it is. But I felt it was very engaged. Like I walked away and went home and told my husband about it and said, wow, what a great community we live in, because people care and they show up. And I think a lot of the questions were, I think it was all valuable information. It wasn't someone like getting up to speak just to hear themselves speak. It was, it was very, I thought it was productive. And I speak at a lot of these meetings, so I have quite a bit of perspective. So I felt as though, Concord cares. Like I walked away and was like, wow, what a great town we live in, right? So.
One of the other observations I'd make, I think that when you're honest, okay, you get a lot back, right? And I think a couple of occasions when I got up and talked about cost and dilemmas and all of that, and then you kind of followed up with, you don't have to be nice.
Yeah.
Let's say what's on your mind.
Tell us what you really think.
I thought there was, that energized the discussion a bit. Because so when and I always find this in public meetings, when you're honest, people are
Respond.
honest right back at you, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we want to hear. I think.
Definitely.
Well,
Just a
one other
question.
thing was,
Oh, no, go ahead.
there was some discussion about having focused meetings that are maybe focused specifically, and I think with the CPAC you'll be doing that, specific to inclusion or specific to energy efficiency. I'm not advocating for that, but that was discussed.
Yeah. So, and where is that, how do we decide if and where, and how does that fit into the schedule, and is that something that's part of this?
Perfect segue.
Okay, on where we go then.
So let me do that.
We're talking about how we can inform and frame conversations and all, and we've referenced the graphics. I think just as a housekeeping issue, some of us have photos from our visits, so if we know where those should go, we'd be happy to offload them.
Can Hill create a Dropbox or something for us to put photos in? That would be very helpful.
Okay.
Is that it?
Thank you.
Great.
Right. So what I have provided for us to take a look at is, I think, in terms of the feasibility study phase decisions, I don't think any of this is going to be surprising to anyone because they're all items that we've discussed. They're items that are from your RFS or they're items from town meeting. It's just, I know that there's a lot of value to recording it and having it in front of you and making sure that you are going to address them. So on the first page, feasibility study phase decisions have to do with setting a project budget, determining the project schedule, the procurement method, and then very high level educational planning, visioning, and programming in order to develop those building concepts is item 4. Now, things that inform item 4 are the number of students. So the enrollment is a very big picture item that we'll be working on and setting during this process. And then, as you all have seen from the visioning and ed planning meeting agendas that are ongoing, Phil and Keith are working to get to the bottom of what is Concord's vision for what spaces they need in order to teach and deliver the education that they want to deliver. So they're working with the educators on developing that updated MSBA space summary that we had gone over in a prior meeting. And that will include things like the auditorium, the size of gymnasium, food service, shelter, and so on. So,
And when this auditorium is there, what they're focused on for the educational needs of the school, this is what
correct.
they would suggest.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, and so all of those pieces in terms of what information they're gathering will be recorded in that space summary sheet. We'll likely be running multiple of those sheets with different enrollments. Possibly we'll be running them with or without a large gymnasium, with or without an auditorium, because we know that until you have that first information of what the impacts are of making those decisions in terms of square footage, then you won't know the impacts to cost. And so this is a really key component, which is why you're always first out of the gate with that educational programming and planning.
Ask one question here. Okay, in terms of the enrollment, we talked about this yesterday, the process for deciding the enrollment. You want to talk to
Sure.
that?
So we've been really trying to dive deep into both enrollment projections and actuals. So I've had conversations with both Hill and SMMA, and then yesterday we did it jointly. So current enrollments out of the elementary school put us down closer to 675 versus, you'll remember, we've been using a number higher towards 750 or a little better. So we've been really looking at that. We've been looking at the NESDEC projections, which is our very typical process in terms of having a consultant give us ideas, factoring a housing development in West Concord with 40, how many starts over there? About 40 houses going in West Concord before the building opens. And the fact that we have currently over 100 middle school students who attend private schools that live in Concord and attend Concord-based private schools, so trying to factor in that variable. It looks like we're getting closer towards a 700-ish number versus the 750. And we're just gonna keep fine tuning that, but that's the work we've been doing the last week, that probably a little smaller is okay. We've got room for more kids to come in because classrooms will be sized for 24, and we typically run classrooms of just about 20 or a little bit more, plus some of the flexible spaces that will give us a little bit of wiggle room. So that's the direction it's going.
When do
We'll firm it up.
when do you need a number at what level of specificity?
So, and this goes back to the risk register piece that was presented. We are asked to not roll that out again at this meeting because there are different approaches that you could take. In a perfect world, you might start out with a known enrollment. But knowing that Concord needs to do this analysis, we understand that we can look at it a few different ways and work with you to make sure that you're comfortable with what you need. But in terms of a date for determining the enrollment, we would want to have complete buy-in by our next school building committee meeting.
Yeah, I think we're honing in. We've made a lot of progress in the last week or so, so I think we're getting there. Yeah,
So
that shouldn't be a problem.
the goal is to have that, and that that is a number that you're going to design to, is that right?
Yes, that is what our concepts will be developed around. Yep.
Okay, and the latest, I mean, it's still in process, but your latest thinking is around.
Yeah, I'm feeling like we're close, yes.
Yeah.
In my current risk register, I have the end of this month. Is that too late? I think.
Well, and
We'll do our best.
And so this goes a little bit to the approval process because I would view the SBC meetings as the drop dead dates because then you have the SBC.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Yeah, Andy, I might be able to suggest a number to you that this committee's gonna have to validate.
Right.
Because I've already said to everyone, I do not wanna own the number and then something unexpected happens and who made that decision?
Yeah, and you'll bring sort of data here, right?
Yeah.
And then you'll
Yeah.
say this is a potential.
Yeah, we'll-
And we will talk about
Put a
it.
package.
Because you will all, everyone in the room will have to be able to answer the question, is that enough or is that too much? Okay, and that's not, it's not, and we want to have a collective discussion about that, right? Because both sides of that, there'll be people who question it.
And there are different groups and similar to sustainability. And we're going to be working with Sustainability Subcommittee to develop a recommendation to bring here for you all to buy into.
Right.
Enrollment,
Same.
square footage, whether a town meeting location is intended to be incorporated. All of those will be worked on and are being worked on as we speak. And a recommendation is going to be brought forward to this committee. And a lot of that will occur on the February 13th meeting.
Lori, I'm sure you've got this, but it'd be helpful to see for the projections over the last 5 years and the actuals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been looking at all of that. So we'll get all of it packaged up to you and I will get that to you before the meeting so we have an informed discussion.
Good.
Yeah.
So it'll be an interesting meeting next time.
And I'm sure the actuals fluctuate over the whole year.
Not dramatically,
Not dramatically.
which is good news. I mean, there's an overall stability here that gives us a really great baseline to work with versus other districts that have really big swings that you can't predict. We're down really fine tuning 30 to 50 kids, not hundreds of kids. For example, I talked to the Lexington superintendent yesterday. They're trying to figure out what to do with 300 more high school kids within the next 2 years. We are not in that. So that actually relaxed me. So we're honing in. I'm feeling good and we'll get all that packaged up so you can all look and have an informed discussion in February.
It's a doable process. I think what we decided with the high school has been reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, we're tight in there now, but we also know it's slowly dropping.
So in terms of
that's
Concord, this is
kind of the
a
best
solvable
place.
problem.
Yeah.
And so cycling back to that end on the earlier bullet points, project schedule, as discussed, there'll be smaller meetings to make a recommendation, and then on the February 13th meeting, Hill will be coming back with that total project schedule and a recommendation. The procurement method, I know we also have some smaller focused meetings and work to do on what procurement method is best, again, so that we can provide that consolidated, informed recommendation to the building committee at the next meeting.
That'll be discussed next time also?
Yes.
Procurement method, great.
Yeah.
I would feel safe saying all of these things will be discussed at every meeting. And so all of that educational planning and building design, again, that rolls up to inform building square footage. Carrying it here just because it's part of a typical feasibility study, you would normally be deciding if you want to do an addition renovation or a new building. Again, I think we've put that to bed, but we will, as part of the feasibility study document, we've been asked to validate prior work, so that will be included. Because of the enrollment conversation, there's always a discussion around how do you want to plan for growth? And maybe a bubble classroom is enough. Maybe building sizing the steel so that you can go up is a better approach. Maybe making it possible that your core is sized for more students so that you can build an additional classroom wing is an approach. So we'll be having that conversation around what you want to do to plan for growth. And growth, and that being said, even though there's no growth in the immediate future, these are supposed to be 50-plus year buildings, so who knows how far and what the area will look like at that point. So adjacencies and building height limitations in some schools and some communities. We hear strong preferences for not being more than 2 stories and things like that. So those are just some of those early discussions that we would want to have during feasibility, so that again, when we do our test fits, we're going in the correct direction overall. That is the segue then to site plan and design. We did hear at the community forum, what about the wetlands? What about the slope? And it's a heavily wooded area. And so those test fits will be looking at trade-offs to locating the building in different areas of the available site. Parking and driveways has to do with traffic, and then fields programs will be speaking with the athletic department on what the goals are for that. Turning the page. As we are already in process with the sustainability subcommittee on this item 6, which has to do with your sustainability options. At our next meeting, this bullet list is pretty accurate as to what we will be addressing, formal agenda pending. But we are going to go over those several different approaches to sustainability, certification goal. Extent of air conditioning actually came up last night.
Sure did. Well, the teachers are funny because some of them are just they're so used to not having things that they are asking for just the basics, and we did assure them that climate control was a given.
More than fans in the window.
Yeah, there is a discussion always of what extent and different choices get made, and some of the I know how that'll go, but they will be comfortable in their classrooms, which is not what they're used to. So.
And so, and a lot of times we find with the existing buildings, they just don't even have enough ventilation, and just with the proper ventilation, it increases your comfort level so much. So that'll be one conversation. PV approach, we'll be working on that. And then decisions around all electric and what that means. So all of that will be in the January 30th meeting with your subcommittee. So those are just those scope items and decision points that are all going to need to be made over the course of the feasibility study that we'll be providing you information on so that you can make those decisions. The next area is the meetings. And these are the groups groupings of meetings that we've identified: educational visioning and programming. As you know from our last meeting, that's ongoing throughout the month of January. That will transition into site and building design concepts in February. Sustainable design and MEP is always something that bridges all phases and all aspects. And then community meetings. So that's just kind of a high level roll-up of the meetings. But I know to Charlie's point, you're interested in what engagement points there will be from here on out. And so we've been working on setting dates with our partners, you and Cole, who are the lead designer on the project. And on your third page, I've collected both the visioning and educational programming meetings at the top of the sheet, and then you'll see in red, about centered to this sheet, a transition from ed programming to concept development. So on January 23rd is kind of our big wrap-up visioning session after the educational programming, that initial community meeting, and our initial visioning session that occurred in early January. At that point in time, we will have a very good grasp of that building square footage, and we'll have those options in the MSBA spreadsheet to compare and contrast what these decisions mean for program. And then, as you can see, by February 13th, we're going to have translated that into the first test fits, the site test fits. And I'm not going to belabor or read through the paragraphs below, but it does describe organizational studies illustrating the building, how it might be configured on the site, and then also tying that back to what does that mean in the educational level. So it's due to the fast track and the interest of getting your new middle school open as soon as possible. This is super compressed, so you'll see that as right in the next meeting on March 5th, we're going to need to be narrowing those concepts down. So on February 13th, SMMA and New Cole will be presenting a myriad of those test fits. And on the 5th, what we're going to be doing is discussing the evolution of those based on the feedback in February 13th and narrowing that in order to start our cost estimate. So we're not going to be providing estimates on 9 concepts or 12 concepts or 6, however many come out of that February 13 meeting. Typically, you would estimate maybe 3. And so that's what we would expect to happen on March 5th. So that on the 19th, which is right up against the end of our feasibility study wrap-up, we would have all of the information collected from all of these meetings and overlaid by the cost in order for you all to make a decision on which of those concepts you prefer.
And can I just explain when you say concepts? It's like a footprint on a site plan and there's like pros and cons. So maybe some have like, it's a huge footprint because it's 1 or 1.5 stories or something versus a 3-story that's gonna have a smaller footprint, which leads to more fields, more parking. So
Exactly.
I don't wanna speak for you, but I do this.
Yeah.
So what typically is presented are a bunch of them and they're just like a little tiny footprint on a site plan. But you can start to imagine where it might go, how that impacts the existing building, future parking, future fields, that sort of thing. So we're not necessarily saying that's the design. I think coming out of it, we're saying to SMMA and you and Cole, here's the direction we want to go. Sort of this location on the site plan, maybe the orientation's important, or the slope is an issue on some. I can imagine that those are some of the things we're going to hear, and that will allow us to then narrow it down. Say, well, maybe some of the best options to pursue are those 3 or those 4. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
okay.
So. And then as a follow-up to that, it's then during schematic design that you get into the detail of how that floor plan looks and works, and it can evolve a lot sometimes during schematic design. But at the end of feasibility, you'll have your location and massing and kind of site plan pretty much the direction.
So I assume that because these are the dates of the committee meeting, that concept meeting 1 is this meeting?
So we hadn't conceived of concept meeting 1 being this meeting because we have a lot of other.
Okay, it's on the same date, right?
Tasks, yes, and that's a coincidence just to work out with timing.
Okay.
And so it's very likely that our partners with New Cole will attend this meeting because they'll be in town, but it's not the objective of this meeting. The 19th meeting is, however, intended to be dedicated to a final presentation of the
to the whole
study.
committee.
Exactly.
Okay. So who do you see in the first 2?
So, and that was something that we were recently discussing as far as the design subcommittee, and I think we've learned that design subcommittee has a really good cross-section of sustainability and educators and other parties with experience in facilities, and so that would be our starting point. I don't know, Tim, if you want to discuss any changes to the makeup of that, or?
I'm fine with that. With others, I would open that.
wait, so just to clarify, you're saying these that are described as concept meeting 1 and concept meeting 2, those would be with the design subcommittee, not this full group?
Exactly.
I think that makes good sense. It feels like a bridge from the visioning to the cross-section representation.
Right.
Before it comes to this large group, kind of in that same mode we talked on the other pieces of let's vet things a bit in the smaller groups, and then the large group gets to hear how that process went and a recommendation.
That makes sense.
That's very consistent with what Tim and I have spoken about as transition points, if you will, to bring the work back towards the design subcommittee and the design subcommittee back toward the design team. Even though we haven't discussed it as a subcommittee yet, I think I can say we're pleased, although we have to check the dates, of course.
And then, so just process-wise, so on those dates, there'll be discussion within the design subcommittee, then it comes to this group when? Because don't we also meet on
the 19th?
Or to the 19th, okay, sorry, that's right. And then it'll come to us again in our March meeting, which is after the 5th, okay. so then, sorry, a follow-up question to that. We've also talked about, again, I'm looking at community inclusion and the fact that people are gonna want input and be able to share opinions on this. So where in this process, as we've talked about, we're gonna compare different designs, and then those are gonna have price tag ramifications. Other than, so we have a public forum on the 27th where we're talking high level. I would guess that the public is gonna wanna look at some of these various options that we're all discussing here and be able to provide feedback. So where does that fit in?
So the already planned February 27th meeting
Right.
would be inclusive of educational program envisioning and these initial concepts that will have already been started on February 13th.
Okay, great. So those will actually be available then.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
great.
we felt that that was a perfect kind of midpoint, just because you'll have already gotten the design subcommittee feedback at an initial viewing. We can make adjustments and tailor that a little bit and then have it.
So if you're
properly.
a community member interested in this project, that's February 27th.
February 27th.
You'll see,
So we want to market it that way.
educational concepts,
Yeah.
and you'll also see the beginning of alternatives related to the siting.
Okay, great.
So that's a good one. If you're on watching TV.
It's an important meeting.
To attend.
Okay. Thank you.
And so we don't need to get into a whole lot of detail on the schematic design. I did, by the end of the feasibility study, we're going to want to have members assigned to the design focus groups that are shown there. I wrote down some of our typical SD process decision-making bullets, and again, just some preliminary exterior and interior design meeting dates, because we're working with you and Cole. We really need to project those way out in order to make sure we're achieving our July deadline.
Good. I just want to make sure, and what this is designed for today is so everybody understands the process of what's going to be happening over the next 2 months. Are there any questions related to that? Everybody pretty clear?
Sorry, one other, actually, backing up a little bit. Just in terms of all the feedback from this past forum, we just did kind of a high level of it. And I know my understanding of the process going forward is that you're going to kind of take all of that and all the feedback you've been getting from teachers, bring it all together, siphon it down to kind of a summary overview for us. So when does that happen? Does that come to us at on the 19th before we go out to the public on the 27th?
So all of that will always be informing any of the design alternative concept meetings.
Right.
So at the initial one, you'll be hearing the feedback from the wetlands delineation, because we will have that information by then and can say, okay, this is what we've learned from your survey and the initial geotech and the initial wetlands delineation. So this is a no-build area because of that, for example. So those will be in those subcommittee meetings, culminating always kind of together with the concept presentations.
Okay, so no, I'm thinking, I think I didn't explain well. I'm thinking more of specifically the feedback that we got at the forum Tuesday night, and that the educational team has been getting from the educators. I think people would love to have a feel for what it is that's been heard. I mean, we went through some high-level concepts right now, but I have 2 pages of notes that's a lot more detailed than that. And I know not everybody took notes, not everybody was there. Is there a time for kind of a summary of the feedback, the input that we've gotten from educators and from the forum, so that everybody can hear a little more detail about it? Or no?
So I asked SMMA to take note from those programming meetings.
Okay.
Matt Rice has been doing them, so I'll follow up and see when will those be distributed.
Okay. And I'm not saying we need to send lots of raw data out.
Yeah,
there. That's not.
only-
No. That's not where I'm going as much as. But it would be good to have a summary of it. Here are the themes that came up in the educator meetings and in the forum.
Well, we can certainly talk about something in advance of February 27th.
Yeah.
So February 27th is key milestone for us in developing the feasibility study, but that does not mean that another informational session can't be provided in the interim. To provide that feedback, to recap the educational mission and programming and respond to what we heard.
And I wasn't even suggesting another public forum or presentation of it, even just to report back to this group.
Well, I think we had established that we would have some kind of a time at each meeting after there's been a public forum to provide the committee with what those questions were, and I think we can do that, not at this meeting, but we can put all that together, or between you and I, we took a ton of notes. But I don't want to duplicate if SMMA is going to take their notes and come up with a report. What we don't have are the feedback from your educational visioning things, but we did commit to bringing what people are saying to this committee following.
So we meet on the 23rd as follow-up to the educational visioning work. The educational leadership team meets then. I think we can talk on a plan at that point. We finish tomorrow with the teachers. And then next week when we meet, we can come up with a outward communication.
Okay, that'd be great.
For the educational vision.
Yes,
Yeah.
specific to that,
Yeah.
to those times that we've spent with the
That's
staff.
terrific, yeah, just kind of a summary of the themes
Yeah.
that came out of that, so we can all have an understanding of, oh, good,
Yeah.
that's what came out of that.
And
That'd be
related to that, maybe it's a document that we put on the website so that someone who
Yes.
isn't
Yes,
aware, they can
exactly.
read through and say, oh, I made that comment, or good, someone else asked about that, or, you know,
Yeah.
and that way we're transparent and sharing. Yes, we heard you. Here's
Exactly.
the summary of what we heard.
Yeah, exactly, because I think people who were there sharing input want to see that it was captured, see how it was used, and if we don't show anything outwardly until we get to, here are the concepts that we're talking about, and yes, we used your feedback, but we're not showing what feedback it's based on. So I want to be able to show that, what feedback these concepts are based on.
A lot of times you might consider an FAQ section on your page at
Okay.
this point.
Okay.
Just so I'm clear though, Julie, I'm happy to kind of go through the notes and try to organize it, but if you guys are already doing that, I don't want to duplicate that.
Right, yeah.
So
No,
Who's doing
so at the conclusion of the feasibility study, there will be a report that has all of that documentation. I'm just hearing that you're looking for something sooner.
Sooner,
Yeah.
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 So we can talk about a way to maybe develop draft sections of that. The thing is, it's all very iterative until the end, but we can certainly work on.
Yeah, I actually have a suggestion. I think,
Yeah.
Pat, you and Heather know the audience you're aiming for. If you're willing, Pat, why don't you give it a draft for us to
Okay.
look at?
Okay.
And then we'll work on the educational visioning summary next
Yeah.
week when we debrief. So we'll take on that part and you can take on the forum part. And
It's really more reporting.
Yeah.
It's not coming to any conclusions.
Right, it's not conclusions or
This
decisions.
is what we heard, so that people know that we heard what we heard.
Yes,
Or we didn't hear what someone said and they want to make sure we heard it.
right.
Okay.
So in
Thank you.
Lexington, we did something similar. We posted on the website,
Yeah.
the FAQ, so I can share that.
Oh, that would be helpful, Andy, thank you.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, you said it.
So are you?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so again, there's that deep dive into feasibility study process with all the proposed meeting dates for the concept meetings. And again, yes, Court, we would love to hear your feedback on those dates and times. And then that, I don't know if due to time, we want to not dive into schematic design and save that for a later time.
I think so. I
Yeah.
mean, this was perfect in
Thank
terms of the next couple of months, which is really right before us, and so people can understand it. So thank you. I think this was a really good update. Thank you. We have anything on the risk register?
So there's no new item on the risk register, but the three main point of the town meeting, if we can get those dates by the end of this month, and then the enrollment, we said we'll have that number by the next building committee meeting, and also the procurement project delivery methods, we're gonna try to get an answer.
That's the only one I don't have. In my mind, I don't have that down now, how we're gonna do that, but we're gonna get it done.
So those are three main items. I'll have an updated risk register that I can present at the next meeting as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have some meeting dates here, right? I think we probably talked about those, but
And added some.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have
We'll
an
update the
addition.
list and get it.
Okay, do you wanna hear additions, or can I just mention, since we're
Yeah.
Yeah.
that next week, just because we won't be moving before then, the communications subcommittee is going to meet Wednesday, the 22nd, next Wednesday at 2:30 PM here in room 3. And anyone is welcome, of course.
All right, thank you. Correspondence, do we have? any
Yeah, we did, and I tried to tally it up. We've had some regular emails, consistent, come in to us. We had 4 emails relative to sustainability and energy usage. Some of those topics we've heard quite a bit about. We had one community member say she lives near the middle school site, and when she moved in 32 years ago, she thought for sure her kids were going to a new middle school. So she's highly supportive.
So we did it, right?
Yeah, highly supportive that we're on this, and she wants to see it get done. We had a question about the vision for pedagogy, which I thought was excellent. The community's asking us that. And also relative to the reconfiguration this year in the grade 6 model we created and how we saw that flowing over. We did have a question about where meetings are posted, so we're still navigating logistics and making sure people know where to find things and all that. So that's, I think, maybe continued efforts on how to help people know where it is on the webpage and such. We're trying also to keep synced up with town hall's calendar, which we had a couple glitches there. I think that's symptomatic of that. So, so that's what we've been hearing. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Public comments, or any public comments? Yes, please.
Harlan Reed, League of Women Voters. When you're doing your FAQ on the January 14th forum, I think, and actually I know, you're going to be able to look at the video, which has now been posted on Minuteman Media Network. So it's up there, you can see the entire thing. The FAQ will help folks who don't want to sit through the entire 2 hours.
Yes.
Second, I did have a question. The February 27th public forum, my understanding is it will show the public designs, but it will not give them the costs for those designs. Is that correct?
Wait, not designs, but
Let's let Kristen answer it. Yeah.
Site test bits.
Site test bits, but there'll be no dollar amounts attached on February 27th. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's right. Any other public comment? All right, there's one thing I forgot to say. I guess correspondence was the right term. I did attend the session that was held at Willard relating to wireless in public places. And I stayed through about 2/3 of it. It was long, it was 3 hours. But it was quite informative. It was a lot of data, and a lot of data coming at you in a short period of time. And I haven't yet formulated an opinion on it. It's very interesting information for people who have studied it for a long time and are very passionate about it, okay? My one major takeaway for me was that 5G might change things quite a lot, okay? The intensity of 5G is quite different than what we've seen so far in terms of wireless transmitters. So that was my major takeaway, and go ahead.
Do you mind if I add to that? This is a topic we need to stay very synced up, and I'm going to look at my school committee members. It's a bigger picture discussion. It's certainly very pertinent here, given the feedback we've had that this is important to certain community members. But it's a whole school system discussion as well. So I think the 3 of us need to really overlap. This is a group that I am actively reaching out to and planning to meet too. So when we talk on specialty groups, that's the middle school will be part of the discussion, but not the whole discussion, because they are approaching us in other ways as well. So I want to give time and attention, and I've said to them up until now we're in a learning and listening mode, and I think that's very appropriate because that's very true, I think. But we'll just need to stay very synced up that the decisions that get made are district-wide and
it's very complex.
It's very complex,
There's deep
yeah.
technology issues, and there are also deep medical issues. And there's this discussion is at the nexus of those two things, so it's not a trivial.
And the research is ongoing. I caught the
Yes.
part of the meeting you
Yes.
didn't, and my observations would mirror yours. And it's a K-12 conversation,
It
a
is.
community conversation, not a middle
Yes, I've actually had
school
the private schools
conversation.
reach out to engage with us on the conversation
And more than
since it's so
schools,
complicated.
right?
Yeah,
But it
They
becomes
see the
one.
phones they're carrying around too.
Well,
thank you, yeah,
It's birth
yes.
to, well,
Okay.
If we're gonna
Any other-
hardwire the building though, with an alternative, it does become an issue for us, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know that we're at all able to weigh in on that at this point.
Not
I
at
think
this
we have a
point,
lot more to
no.
learn
All right.
before we make that
Those are
decision.
among the questions.
Yeah.
Any other correspondence, public comment? Okay, with that, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Bye.
Thank you, that was a lot.